Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the class. We are so glad to be here with you. My name is Nick Meisner.
And I'm Lisa, Nick's wife.
And we are really excited about sharing with you on this important topic of how do you gain energy independence and how do you get from where you are today to where you want to end up. So, what you're going to learn in the class, you're going to learn what living off the grid really looks like.
Also, you'll learn some cheap and easy things you can do right now to start your off-grid transition.
We're going to show you how to make a gradual and painless transition from an on-grid home to an off-the-grid home.
And also, we'll look at how to drastically cut the cost of your off-grid solar system without cutting quality or, for that matter, your lifestyle habits.
Now this class is roughly around an hour long, give or take some, and then after that we'll have a short resources section and a question and answer section because we want to make sure that we get any questions you have answered so that you are able to really put this into action. So just in case you're not acquainted with us, once again, I'm Nick Meisner.
And I'm Lisa Meisner, and these are our two beautiful, precious children, and we have the privilege of living in the mountains of northern Idaho.
And the last time that my home was on the grid was in the last millennium, 1999. Now, like many of you, we had a very, very limited budget to work with during our off-grid transition. So we had to get very creative and learn how to overcome that obstacle. And after years of gaining firsthand experience off the grid, we had so many people asking how they could do it also. And so we took that experience and we put it into action. In the last 12 years or so, we have been teaching thousands of folks, literally thousands of folks across the nation, about how to make their own power off the grid with a limited budget and without becoming an electrical engineer. And, you know, there was just such a scarcity of off-grid training for non-technical people that I actually ended up developing a course called Off-Grid Boot Camp. And it's the only complete off-grid training course that I'm aware of that is specifically for off-grid users. And it's educated hundreds of students across the nation and really across the world about how to successfully set up an off-grid power system and do it right the first time with a reasonable budget and also without becoming an electrician.
Oh, and one other thing too, we also teach our students how to do all of that, cutting costs and setting up a solar system without dramatically changing their current lifestyle. A lot of people think that when you go off the grid, you have to, get a crank blender in order to cook in the kitchen or things like this, kind of like living Amish, basically. And that's not what we teach by a long shot.
Well, speaking of that, what does living off the grid actually look like in our home? Is this what it looks like?
No, thank you. Not a chance.
Pull out the scrub board, huh?
Yeah, I guess, that's often what a lot of people think that we live like. When we say we live off the grid, they think, oh, wow, so you're used to cooking and baking without, all the modern appliances like a stove or oven or blender and hot air popcorn popper and all of these things. But actually, you'd be surprised if you came to visit us and we didn't tell you we lived off the grid. You probably wouldn't be able to tell.
That's right. So anyhow, we actually put together a little video tour, just a quick video tour of our home, and we thought you might like to see it. And so we want to go ahead and just play it now, and just to give you a mental picture of what living off the grid actually looks like. And once you've got that picture in your mind, I think you're going to be in a better position to learn how to get from where you are now to where you want to be. So let's go ahead and roll that video.
Sounds good. Some people think that to live off the grid, you have to live non-electrically, and that's not the case at all. In fact, I just used a blender to make this delicious smoothie here in the kitchen. There's a lot of kitchen appliances that you can use in your kitchen when you go off the grid. In fact, one of the most used appliances is the stove and an oven. While wood cook stoves are enjoyable and fun to use and a great option for off-grid living, you can also have a propane stove and oven that works just fine without consuming massive amounts of power, and it works just the same. Also, being a stay-at-home mom, I like to make homemade bread, but I don't have time to stand there kneading the dough for minutes on top of minutes. So I use my KitchenAid. You may have a KitchenAid or something similar that you like to use. Well, you don't have to throw it out. You can save it, keep it, and use it in your off-grid kitchen just the same as you would any other kitchen. In fact, we even use a hot air popcorn popper. I love popcorn, and in this family we like to eat popcorn a lot, so we use our hot air popcorn popper to make popcorn. We have a juicer. We make almond butter and vegetable juices all the time for this family. There's so many different kitchen appliances that are out there, and you may have different kitchen appliances that you like to use than what I use. And that's great. Maybe it's a food processor or any number of other kitchen appliances. Well, you can use them in your off-grid kitchen just like I use mine in mine.
Where am I going to plug this in? I guess we're going to need to put a bigger power strip in or something like that. Does this look familiar to you? That's right. We've got all the stuff that makes an office, and you know, everything from the computer. We could use a desktop computer if we wanted to, but we like laptops. They're a little more energy efficient, but it'd be no problem if we wanted to put in an iMac here. And of course, printer is a nice multi-purpose printer, scanner, all that good stuff. And hard drives. As you can see, I do media work, and so I've got multiple hard drives that work just fine. These are high-end hard drives. And you know, battery chargers, shredder, paper shredder, all that kind of good stuff. And yes, I am being printed off the grid.
Hey, so here's our bathroom, and I was just using my straight iron. I like using straight irons instead of curling irons, but either way, you can use a straight iron or a curling iron. And of course, being the woman that I am, I have a hair blow dryer that I dry my hair with whenever I take a hot shower. And also, we have an electric razor that my husband likes to use. And of course, we're very old-fashioned. We use electric toothbrush.
Okay, I'm going to help Daddy close this. Put your hand there. So you can see what we have here is a fairly average run-of-the-mill front-loading washer. It's about 10 or 15 years old, nothing new or fancy, but it's quite energy efficient. And for the amount of laundry we do, it's excellent. Uses about 100 watt-hours per load of electricity, which is pretty good. You can find less than that with some front-loading washers, but not bad, especially for one this old. And right here is our pressure tank, and it's being pressurized from a jet pump outside. It's a conventional jet pump, and I plan to install a very energy efficient DC surface pump this summer, but the jet pump was what was there when we moved in, and I haven't had a chance to change it, and it's been working out fine. It's just that the DC pump will be more energy efficient, but this has been working out. And back here is our refrigerator. You'll notice it looks like a chest freezer, because it is. It's a chest freezer that we've converted into a refrigerator because it is a very low-cost way to have a very energy-efficient refrigerator. And I'll tell you more about that a little bit later in the video. Just needed to do a little grinding, and as you can see, power tools are no problem off the grid. I use a wide variety of power tools when I need them. Skill saws, drills, belt sanders, even small air compressor. We're not talking one of these great big huge air compressors like you would see in an auto mechanic's shop, but you know, a portable one that can be carried. Really, I say anything that you can plug into a 3-prong plug like that should be just fine off the grid. For heating your home, I really recommend a good old wood stove. It just has so many advantages going for it. It's non-electric in most cases, absolutely no electricity required to heat your home. Some stoves, such as this one, will have a blower or a fan built in, just kind of as a turbo assist, you might think. If it's a really cold morning and you want to heat your house up real quickly, you can turn the fan on, but it's not required. And also, I like wood stoves for the independence of, you can grow your own fuel. And so if you're in a pinch, you don't have to buy fuel. Sure, you could buy a truckload of wood if you wanted to, just for the convenience of it, but you have options for independence, and that's what I really like about wood stoves or wood cook stoves. A modern Amish-made wood cook stove is a great option as well for heating your home, and it's multi-purpose. So what did you think? Did that look like living in the Dark Ages or something?
No, not at all to me. And like I said before, you probably wouldn't know that we lived off the grid, except that we already told you that we do. We have preferences for appliances and things that we like to use, but hey, you've got your preferences too. And just imagine yourself living off the grid.
So, what you can do now to start going off the grid. We're going to be looking at 4 secrets, 4 really important secrets for doing this. These are things that you can start doing right now. So secret number 1. What is secret number 1?
Secret number 1 is off-grid efficiency. It's basically learning how to live an energy efficient lifestyle, because the more electricity that you use in your home, the larger your system, your solar system, is going to have to be. And of course, that's going to cost more money. So if we can get our power usage, if we can dramatically cut it, that's going to dramatically cut the amount of money you're going to have to spend in order to set up a solar system.
That's right.
So key number 1.
So these are things that you can start doing now to dramatically cut your power usage, which are going to cut your system's size and cost.
And I bet that many of you will be able to go and implement some of these things even tonight.
That's right.
Or tomorrow.
This is really practical stuff. But one of the easiest things, and this is probably something that you've already started implementing, is light bulbs. The standard incandescent light bulbs are becoming less and less common, and compact fluorescents are really in, and LED lights are really in these days. Yes, they are more expensive, but the cost is coming way down. And personally, my preference is LED. Because it uses even less power, and it doesn't have the mercury inside of it like compact fluorescent does. But either way, they're both very, very energy efficient. There's also another really simple, easy way that you can start really cutting your power usage dramatically.
And it's called phantom power. And phantom power is basically power that is being used without you knowing it. So for example, there are a lot of appliances in your home that, while they may be turned in the off position, they're still using little bits of power.
Say your computer, for instance.
That's true.
You turn it off and you think it's off, but it's still using power as long as it's plugged into that outlet in the wall.
Even cell phone chargers. You can disconnect your phone from the cell phone charger, but as long as it's still plugged into that outlet, it's still using little bits of power, of electricity.
Granted, it is just a little bit,
yes,
but if you get 15 or 20 or 30 little bits of power that are wasting electricity 24 hours a day, that adds up to quite a sizable amount of power. And so here's a little example that we worked up of what a typical home might look like. And I actually think this is quite conservative for most homes.
Yes.
But let's just say you didn't have a lot of gadgets and knickknacks and things like that. These are just some of the phantom loads that your home might be using when those appliances are off. And just with this conservative list right here, we came up with a total daily wasted power of over 2.4 kilowatt hours. Now, just to give you a little context here, that is actually a little bit more than what our entire home uses in a full day for everything.
Wow.
That's how much power is being wasted in a conservative home with just phantom power. That's not how much those appliances are using. That's how much is being wasted when they're turned off.
When you're not using them, they're just plugged into the wall still.
Isn't this crazy?
It's awful.
And you can start to see, just with that one thing, you can start to see why we use so much less power than other people do, but yet we still live very similarly.
So, what can we do to get rid of this phantom power problem?
Well, there's a really, really simple, easy solution, and that's a power strip. You know, these power strips with an on-off switch. Yes, you can find a fancy smart strip like the one on the bottom there, but you really don't need that. We just use basic plain Jane power strips that cost less than $5 probably. And you put a power strip in wherever you have a cluster of appliances that are burning phantom loads. For instance, at your desk, you've got your computer, maybe some computer speakers, your printer, maybe some external hard drives, and, you know, who knows, a litany of appliances that are potentially using phantom power. Plug all of those into one power strip, and then it's very simple. Whenever you're not there at the desk working, you just flip that switch off.
Or another place would be the entertainment center.
True.
You've got the TV, the VCR, the DVD player rather. VCR, you can tell where I'm coming from. DVD player, all of the, you know, the speakers, all of those different electronics. They're all plugged in. They're using like a boatload of phantom power when you have them in the off position. So plug all of those into a power strip that you can just flip that switch off when you're finished using everything.
And this is not a matter of doing without these things. This is just a matter of taking the 1 second that it takes to flip that switch off when you are done using the appliance. That's all it takes. No change in your lifestyle, really. And so that is a really simple, easy way to deal with this problem, and that's how we do it and many, many others. Low-cost way to do it. Now, some other appliances that you might take a look at are, one of those would be a refrigerator or a freezer. This is one of the first things that I have folks look at when they are trying to become energy efficient, because a refrigerator and a freezer are cycling on and off 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And so naturally, they are going to use a considerable amount of power. And this is one of those areas where it's really worth your while to shop around and find a model that is very energy efficient, because you would be surprised how broad the spectrum is from very efficient to very inefficient when it comes to an appliance like this, even in the same brand.
And you know, there's other appliances too in the around the home that are appliances like that as you need them replaced, you can replace them with more energy efficient options.
Such as a water pump.
Exactly.
You know, water pumps, if it's a great big huge one, which I often see this being done, if you have a well as your water source, it seems to be a very common thing for well drillers to put in a oversized water pump, because they want to make sure that folks have all the volume of water that they could possibly ever need. But what that does is it is a monster of a pump. It uses a lot of electricity, and most people don't need nearly as large of a water pump as they actually have in the well. And so that's something that you might look at if it's, you know, a 1 horsepower, 1.5, 2 horsepower pump, something like this. You might look into that and see if there's some way you could get that down to a 3/4 or even a 1/2 horse pump. Would be even better if you can make it work, you know, with the volume of water that you need. And another one, what would another one be?
Another one was a ceiling fan.
Now, a ceiling fan.
Unreal, but it's true. A ceiling fan uses a lot of power, especially if you're the type of people who like to run the ceiling fan during the summer or during the winter time when it's when you're trying to heat the house. We like to run ceiling fans in the home during the winter time to drive the heat, because heat rises and so it all goes up to the ceiling, and so we'll use a ceiling fan to push that warm air back down. So we actually use it also during the winter time. And a ceiling fan, if you use it a lot, you really want to invest in a more energy efficient option, which there are out there.
And so just to make this clear, ceiling fans do not necessarily use a ton of power while they're running. You might look at it and it might be 60 watts or something like that. And you say,
Yeah, that's
that's
true.
not much. But what we're looking at, what you have to look at when you're coming from an off-grid perspective is how much cumulative energy does it use in one day. And so if you are a person that, especially during the winter, leaves the ceiling fan going 24/7, that's where a ceiling fan can really add up to a ton of power.
Yes.
And that's another one of those appliances where you can find a huge diversity of power usages, even among the same brands. And so just by simply doing due diligence and shopping for a really efficient model, you can save yourself a ton of power. You haven't changed a thing about your lifestyle. You still
Yes.
have everything that you did before. You just were shopping smart.
Yes, and there are we could continue going on and on about all the different appliances that are in the house. Clothes washer, for example, dishwasher. You can get energy efficient options out there. And we encourage you to start, especially if you need to replace your refrigerator already, or if you need to replace any appliance in the home, just do a little bit of research and find out what an energy efficient option is. And you're going to find that by doing all of these different strategies, you're going to cut the cost, or cut the amount of power that you're using, which in the end is going to cut the cost of your solar system.
That's right. And just as once again as an illustration, going back to the refrigerator thing, here's a comparison of a 1996 20 cubic foot side by side model used 2.2 kilowatt hours per day, roughly. And then we've got a 2007 22 cubic foot, so it's larger, but it's a top freezer. That's a plus. The top freezers are generally going to be more energy efficient than a side by side. But it's a newer model. It's more energy efficient. It's 1.3 kilowatt hours
Wow.
per day. Just, so it's an even larger model, but because it was a newer, more efficient one. Now, newer doesn't always equal more efficient,
Yes.
but it often does. Generally, newer is going to be more efficient. So just some simple things like that can cut your power usage dramatically. You might be wondering, how do I know how much power the refrigerator uses? Just look on that little yellow energy guide that's on the side of the appliance when you're looking at it at the store, and it will tell you how many kilowatt hours per year. That's estimated yearly electricity use. Just divide that by 365, and you've got a really rough idea of how much daily power usage that might be. So for this particular model, it'd be somewhere in the neighborhood of 1 kilowatt hour per day. And that would be a very efficient unit if it's a full-sized one. In this case, it's I believe this tag is for a chest freezer or something like that. But that will make it really, really easy for you to compare one model with another and give you a rough idea of what to expect. And as far as the ceiling fans goes, just a comparison here. Here's a conventional, regular paddle fan on the left. And these are fairly current models. I just got this off of the Home Depot website. 66 watts. So if you were running it 24 hours a day, that'd be 1.6 kilowatt hours per day just for the ceiling fan.
Wow.
That's not much less than what we use in our entire home for everything. But if you had just shopped around a little bit on the same website, you could find a ceiling fan that is moving a similar amount of air. It's slightly less, but if you look at the cubic feet per minute, it's not much different than the one on the left. And it's using 4.8 watts instead of 66 watts to move that similar amount of air. And that would work out to be roughly 1/10 of 1 kilowatt hour per day.
Wow.
So 1.6 versus 0.1. That's just with a ceiling fan. Can you imagine if you had 2 or 3 of these going?
That's
what
amazing.
an enormous difference that would be. That'd be
Yes.
huge.
Really adds up.
So let's just take the ceiling fan and the fridge. In this example, let's say that you had upgraded from that older refrigerator to the newer one. Granted that 07 one is, quite a number of years old now, but
Yes.
that was just newer. If you had done that upgrade, and then if you upgraded from the 66 watt fan to a 4.8 watt fan, you would be saving somewhere in the neighborhood of 2.4 kilowatt hours per day. And once again, to put this in perspective, that's more power than we use in our entire home. And that's just the amount of power that you saved And the beautiful thing is you haven't changed anything about your lifestyle. You're still living the same way.
You're still running the fan, and you still have the refrigerator in the kitchen. There's nothing different. It's just that now you're using energy efficient appliances.
That's right. Now, there are some appliances that are big electric hog systems, and we need to look into other options for them. For instance, for a heating system, an electric heating system, a conventional forced air conditioning system, an electric oven or range, and an electric water heater, and an electric clothes dryer. For each of these, they use massive amounts of electricity. If they are electric models of each of those, just massive amounts of electricity. And while anything is possible, you could build an off-grid system big enough to power these. If you're trying to do it with a limited budget, it's not going to happen.
Yes.
The only way that you are going to be able to do this with a reasonable budget that most people could afford is to transition away from electricity for these major systems. Now, notice, I'm not saying do without the heat or the AC or the oven and range or the water heater or the clothes dryer. We're not doing without. We're just switching to something other than electricity. So, what would an option be for heating? Wood.
Yeah.
I mean, wood is the ultimate for energy efficient heat. You know, it uses no electricity unless yours happens to have a little blower on it.
Ours does.
But, you know, it's often those blowers are just optional. Maybe you only use them on a really cold morning. But there's nothing like wood heat. And yes, there are possibly some other options. There's some non-electric propane heaters out there and things like that. But I'd really like to see you transition into something that is more independent for your heat source. And wood is the ultimate. It gives you a lot of latitude for how you can heat your home. And another thing would be air conditioning. Some options for air conditioning would be if you are in a location like ours, for instance, where it cools off every night, then you can probably get by just fine without air conditioning as long as your house is well insulated and you have ceiling fans and you cool the house down every night and then close all the windows first thing in the morning. That works in a northern climate like ours. But I fully recognize that there's many climates where it's just going to be downright miserable if you don't have air conditioning. I grew up in a climate like that. And so in that situation, you do have some options. If you're in a smaller home, little window air conditioning units can work very well. We actually have a window air conditioning system in our small home, and we don't use it very much because we don't have too many days that are miserably hot here. But on some of those days, we'll crank it up, and it works just fine. If you have a larger home, then you're probably going to want to look at a split system. And if you're not familiar with those, you can Google it online or talk to somebody who's knowledgeable about heating and air conditioning systems and these sorts of things. Split systems are a much more energy efficient way to cool your home than a conventional forced air conditioning system. So those are some options there. Now, what about for cooking your food?
Well, you can transition your electric stove, oven, and range to propane or a gas one, or you could do a wood stove. We had a wood cook stove. Like a wood cook stove. That's right. I cooked on a wood cook stove for the first 2 years that we were married. We were in a rental house that had a wood cook stove, and I absolutely loved it. At first, I thought, "Oh, this is going to be so much work," but I was surprised that I found it to be actually easier to cook on a wood cook stove than on a electric stove or a propane stove.
And we plan on putting one in our new home now as soon as we can.
That's right, because those are wonderful options. Give it a try. It really is a lot of fun, and like I said, I found it to actually be more efficient and easier to work with a wood cook stove. And
the latest thing we've been experimenting with is a solar oven, which I was actually kind of skeptical of them at first, but we've, with our experimentation so far, we've been really impressed with how well it can do. And, while it's not going to necessarily be able to cook your food every day of the year, especially if you're in a cloudy climate, it's able to greatly reduce the amount of days that you have to either use propane or some other source of cooking, and can really fill a great niche during the summertime when we're not
Yes.
running the wood cook stove, because we've puzzled over that. How do you cook during those hot summer days when you're not running the wood cook stove? And our solution up till now has been a propane oven and range, and that can still work, but we're always looking for independent options that where we don't have to buy fuel, and that's a beautiful thing about those solar ovens.
Yes, very true. Another large appliance that you might want to switch out is your water heater.
And conventional gas water heater, propane or natural gas, works just great, and uses virtually no power. You could use your wood stove to heat your water. We've certainly done that, and it works very well in the wintertime. And if you're really looking for energy independence, or for independence from fuels that you have to buy, you could use your wood stove to heat your water in the wintertime and use a solar water heater in the summertime. And some of the solar water heaters out there are actually very efficient, and they work very, very well. And so there's a lot of options out there that don't necessarily involve a totally electric model for these major systems. And then what about for drying your clothes?
Oh, well, there's lots of different options. I say lots of different options. Of course, you can get a propane clothes dryer, or there's actually something called a solar clothes dryer. If you've never heard of it, it's really awesome. You just take this string and you string it up between two trees, and you get some nice clips, and you go out there and you soak in the sunshine while you hang your laundry to dry.
Otherwise known as air drying.
Yes.
So if we were to total up, though, if you were in a totally electric home that used electricity for all of these things, for heating, AC, forced air heating and AC system, electric oven and range, electric water heater, electric clothes dryer, all of this, that could actually total up to as much as 40 kilowatt hours per day to power all of those things. Now you might be thinking, well, how can that be when the daily average for an entire home is 30 kilowatt hours per day? Well, the reason why is because some homes, it varies in different parts of the country. Some parts of the country lean more on gas, or some parts of the country use heating oil as a primary source of heating their home. And, most homes aren't totally electric for all of those items. It's just for some of them. But if you were to run all of those at the same time, on the same day, it could be 40 kilowatt hours per day. Wow. Massive. Now, once again, I just got to say this just to put it in perspective. We use roughly 2 to 2.5 kilowatt hours per day for everything in our home.
Wow.
So that's secret number 1, off-grid efficiency. Now let's move on to secret number 2.
Secret number 2 is step-by-step transition. So you're currently on the grid right now. But
or at least most of you.
Or most of you, yes. And you're wanting to transition to an off-grid home. How do you do this? Well, take it one step at a time.
So, what is a step-by-step transition going to look like? Well, step 1, we're going to start out with just a backup generator and a transfer switch and some fuel stored up. And this is a step that probably many of you have already taken. I wouldn't be surprised.
I hope so.
Many people already have a backup generator installed, and a transfer switch is, we'll take a look at it in just a minute, but it's basically a piece of equipment that is for safety purposes to make sure that your home is never hooked up to the power company and your generator at the same time, because that would be really bad. But pretty simple, and this is just for emergency use of critical loads during a short blackout. This is not energy independence. This is just a first step. So right now, you're hooked up to the power lines. What you're going to do is you're going to have an electrician install a transfer switch. We already discussed transfer switch. I know this diagram says on and off. That's the closest sketch I could find to a transfer switch. But a transfer switch, it's not on and off. It's either flipped up for power lines or down for a generator. And so you still have power coming in from the power company just as normal, but if you ever have a power outage, you go and start up your generator, and then you throw that switch down, and you're now running your home off of the generator. It's that simple. And it's a really easy fairly reasonably priced first step that most people are in a position to do very, very quickly.
Yes, so get that generator. So step 2.
So step 2, you're going to add a battery bank and an inverter so that you are able to have more energy independence. You're still not going to be completely independent because you still are going to be running the generator, but you are going to be greatly reducing the amount of time that generator is running. So let's see how that works and what that looks like. So we got our transfer switch installed. Now we are, instead of running the generator straight into the transfer switch, we are installing a little miniature power system with a generator hooked into an inverter, hooked into a battery bank. So here's how this works. If you have a power outage, your batteries have power stored in them all the time. You're going to make sure that they're topped off, but it's a different kind of power than what you use in your house. And that's where the inverter comes in. The inverter takes that battery power and converts it into regular household current that you use in your home and sends it to your home. So all you'd have to do is go out and throw the transfer switch, and you would now be powering your home off of the batteries. But as we all know, batteries don't last forever. And after you have run your house for a little while on the batteries, of course, how long depends on a lot of factors, like the size of the battery bank. But after you've run your house for a little while, you're going to need to charge those batteries up. And that's where the generator comes in. You're going to run the generator for a little while, and there is a charger that is built into that inverter, a very powerful charger that is going to charge those batteries up. And then you're going to turn the generator off. So with the previous step, you only had electricity when the generator was actually running. So if you wanted to have power 24/7, you'd have to run the generator 24/7.
Which means you'd have to have a lot of fuel stored up too, because you'll be plowing through that fuel pretty quickly.
And a lot of wear and tear on the generator
That's true
too.
too.
So with this setup, depending upon a lot of factors, I can't give you solid numbers because it depends on a lot of factors, but just to give you a general idea, you're only going to be running the generator for several hours every few days, something like that. And you'll have electricity 24/7, all the time. So this is a great option. So then we come to
The last step.
step 3.
Step 3, you're going to add solar panels and a charge controller so that you can now be energy independent, and you're getting power for free because you're not paying for fuel anymore.
This is where it gets really fun.
Yes, this is where it's really, really fun.
And so this is what it looks like. Basically, we're just taking the solar array and we're running it into the battery bank. There is if you want to get technical here, there is a charge controller in between the solar array and the battery bank, and that keeps the solar array from overcharging your batteries. But basically, it's just running straight into the batteries, charging them up for free. And then what that means is, with the solar array charging your batteries, now you either are not going to be running the generator at all or very, very little, because you're replenishing the power that you're using from the sun. And so now the generator moves from a primary role into a backup role, where the only time that you're running it is, if there's some exceptionally cloudy weather or a situation like that. And so this is a great step-by-step progression that enables you to get off the grid one step at a time with a smaller outlay of cash.
Yes.
Which is really, really valuable, because I don't like going into debt. And if you were to buy the whole package, the full system at the very get-go, depending upon how much power you're using and things like this, it's not going to be pocket change.
Yes.
I will say it's not going to be probably nearly as expensive as you think it is, because I hear of people getting astronomical quotes from solar companies, and I just shake my head. But it is going to be more than pocket change. And so this makes it where you can do it one step at a time and progressively get more and more independent as you save up your money and go to the next step.
And each component that you purchase, you can build on that, which is really awesome with this step-by-step transition. Shop around for deals, and when stuff goes on sale, then get it.
That's right.
And then you can add it to what you already have and slowly build on your system.
So that was secret 2, our step-by-step transition. Now, what is our next secret?
Well, our secret number 3 is to accurately design your power system. So we call it accurate system design. And really, it's how to start collecting the data you need in order to design a system that's actually suited to meet your needs, not ours, not your neighbors, but your needs.
And this is something that you can do right now, actually.
Absolutely.
And something that you really need to do right now. This is not
Exactly.
something that you want to be doing as you're in the throes of going off the grid, or
Yeah.
or what I find a lot of people do is they start buying equipment and then they say, oh, how much do I need?
Oh, yes.
And that's a terrible way of going about this, because what they're likely to do is, if you don't properly design your system ahead of time, you're either going to end up with a system that is way too large and expensive, in other words, where you spent way too much money on it, or the more likely scenario is that you're going to end up with a system that is too small and it simply is just not
Inadequate.
workable. You're going to end up running the generator a lot, or hooking back up to the power company or something like that. So we want to avoid both of those, and we want a system that is designed properly where it meets our needs, but yet it is as economical as possible. So let's jump into accurate system design and just give you an idea of what to expect, how this actually happens. And it all starts with an accurate average daily power usage. Now, what is average daily power usage? Well, you've already heard me telling you about ours a number of times. Our average daily power usage is somewhere in the neighborhood of 2 to 2.5 kilowatt hours per day. And it varies depending upon the season, whether it's winter or summer or things like this. But that is the keystone from which your entire system design is built on. And until you have an accurate idea of how much power you're going to be using off the grid, you really have no way of even starting your off-grid power system design. So this is really the first step. And some people might have the bright idea of going to their power bill and looking up an average of the last year's power bills and dividing that by 30 days in the month and coming up with power usage there. But I would suggest, or I would discourage doing that, because most likely the power usage that you're going to have off the grid is going to be very different than your power usage now on the grid, just because of some of the things that we've just been talking about implementing.
Yes.
Choosing your appliances carefully,
Light bulbs.
all the other things, refrigerator, freezer,
Yes.
fans, all of that. But also the big things are transitioning away from electrically dominant systems like your electric oven or range or clothes dryer or things like that.
Water heater.
A lot of you are going to have electric appliances like that in your house right now, and you maybe haven't transitioned away from those to become very energy efficient. And so if you take your current power bill and divide it by 30 days in the month, you're going to end up with probably a very large number of kilowatt hours per day, and that's going to be an expensive system. And this is when you hear about people getting these quotes for massive amounts of money for a solar system, that's usually how it happens, is the company that they're dealing with doesn't want to take any time to educate them about energy efficiency, and they just take their power bill and say, okay, to power what you're doing right now, it's going to take this many this size of system, and it ends up being, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000, $60,000.
$80,000.
Unbelievable. Ours was nowhere even close to that. And so this is really, really key. And how do you do that? How do you figure out your average daily power usage? Well, you're going to take each appliance one at a time. It is going to take a little bit of time, a little bit of footwork on your part, but it's going to be so worth it. And this is a tool right here that you really need. The kilowatt meter is indispensable for measuring your appliance's power usage. Not only the appliances like maybe a computer or a blender that are using a fairly constant amount of power, but also appliances like a refrigerator where it's cycling on and off, on and off. Just measuring how much power it's using when it's on doesn't really tell you anything. you need to know how much cumulative power it uses in a whole day. And so with this kilowatt meter, you plug it in for 24 hours and come back, and it will tell you how much cumulative power it used for the entire day. And that's really, really valuable for things like refrigerator, freezer, washer, dryer, any of these kinds of appliances like that. And then what I do, you could do this on paper, but I use a spreadsheet and I punch all the numbers in and have it average it out per daily use for average daily power usage, because some appliances you're not using every day, and so you need to factor it out over an entire week. And so actually I will give you my spreadsheet that I use to do this, because let me tell you, it is a huge time saver. I've had people tell me that I should be charging a bunch of money for this, but I just want to give it to you as a thank you for attending the class. And so I'll try and remind me to send you an email. I'll try and remember, but if I forget, don't be afraid to email me, and I will send you this spreadsheet so that you can start typing in your appliances and figure out what your average daily power usage is, and then you can mess around with it. You can see what would happen if you went from 2 freezers down to 1, or if you switched from this appliance to a more efficient model. You can see what the impact would be on your average daily power usage, and that's really, really helpful.
And this is really easy to do. I've even done a system design before for someone else. So really, the calculator is very easy to use.
Yes. So that's the average daily power usage. Then an accurate system design is going to give you a battery bank. It's going to size your battery bank to give you 3 to 5 days of reserve. And that's just kind of a general rule of thumb. Depends upon your solar climate. An area like a more desert climate could get away with probably 2 or 3 days of reserve. A cloudier climate is going to need more like 4, maybe even 5 days of reserve of batteries. And basically that's talking about if you had no solar input, nothing charging your batteries, how many days could you go on your current battery bank without discharging it too deeply. That's what the days of reserve is about. So a system design is going to take that into account, and also your shade situation, the impact of shade on your solar array, temperature, solar data, like as in solar climate data, how much different areas of the country and of the world get dramatically different amounts of solar potential, solar energy, just depending upon their climate. Some areas are sunnier than others, and the seasons make a difference in all of this. So all of these things are taken into account in a system design, and also inefficiencies and wiring and transforming power from AC to DC and things like this. And so what I want you to get a feel for, the reason I'm telling you all of this is not to overwhelm you, but I want you to recognize that sizing a power system is not just a quickie thing where you just call up a company and you say, I want to, I've got a 2,500 square foot home and I want to go off the grid. How much is it going to cost? I get that question all the time. I've got a 2,500 square foot home. How many solar panels do I need? And it's like there's a lot of factors to take into account, but it can be done.
Yes.
And I actually, after crunching all these numbers for years and going through all the math, it's some fairly complex math. I actually came up with a calculator where I could punch in just the raw data, just the things like the power usage and the shade situation and the solar climate data and temperature and just some raw information like that, and the calculator will crunch all the numbers for me and just tell me how many solar panels I need and what size of battery bank and all of that. And it
saves loads of time.
You are
I can
not
even
kidding.
use it. I've even used it and helped design a couple of systems myself, so it's very easy to use the calculator.
Right, but and I'll tell you about this calculator in just a little bit. You may be wondering how you can get a hold of it, and I'll tell you about it in just a minute in the resources section. But I just want you to realize that designing your system is not something that should really be done long distance.
Yes.
There's some things that are going to have to be done in person, either by you or by somebody else. And so just be aware of that. You don't want a quickie system design. You want it to be done right. This is really, really important. You get this right, and the whole rest of your off-grid journey is much more likely to be to really go very well and be successful. So
secret number 4.
Secret number 4.
You need an experienced guide. You know, how to learn the ropes ahead of time and yet avoid many of the issues that so many people who are new to this run into. Also, as you're working on planning, putting together your power system, doing an accurate system design, checking the power usage in your home, all of these things that we've been talking about, you always run into hitches and like how you end up with questions that maybe aren't easily answered. And you can do research and find every single answer out there all over the internet, and they're not always the best answers.
YouTube experts all over the place.
My. So really, you need an experienced guide. You know, recently we had the opportunity to go to a foreign country to participate in medical tourism. The prices were cheaper. So we did a lot of research ahead of time, and we were very comfortable with the idea and planned our trip, bought the tickets and the whole 9 yards. And of course,
thought we were good to go.
Yeah, we thought we were ready to go. We were learning a little bit of the language and everything that we could do ahead of time to prepare ourselves for this experience in another country. But when we got down there, I tell you what, it was quite another story. Once we got on the ground, we kind of felt like this, a little bewildered and kind of completely lost. We were like, oh, seriously, I don't think any reading or YouTube videos could have really prepared us for what we experienced when we got down there.
Just the overload.
Yeah, really, the overload. A new
Everybody's
language,
speaking a different language.
completely different culture.
And you don't know what to look out for. You know, what are
Yes.
the dangerous areas, dangerous parts of town? You know, what am I doing that's making myself a target? How am I doing things that is making me get charged higher prices than the locals? And all of these.
Because we're so new, it was easy to take advantage of us unless there was somebody who knew the culture. And so, you know, we actually met 2 ladies down there who we called our guardian angels. And the reason was because they just took us under their wings, and literally they drove with us to the store and helped show us how to navigate through the store with this different culture and different money and different language. And, you know, they set us up with, they helped us get a SIM card in our phone. And I mean, the whole 9 yards, they just surrounded us for our entire experience in Costa Rica. And, you know, it was not only a successful trip, but it was a wonderful experience down there because we had 2 ladies who were experienced in their culture, in this foreign country, who could help guide us through it so that we were able to be successful and enjoy the journey as well. And this is what we want for you. We want you to have a successful experience, but also to be able to enjoy the journey. But in order to do that, you need a couple of guardian angels also. You need someone who is experienced, who can walk beside you through this process step by step and giving you the education that you need, as well as answering questions. And, you know, somebody who has that good experience, who knows what it's like to live off the grid and who has a lot of experience in designing systems and footing the problems that can arise from an off-grid system. And
I would highly recommend
if you can find somebody in your local area who is just that, then please do take advantage of that person and have them see if they'd be willing to, you know, to help you through that journey and that
take you under their wing.
Yeah.
Because you have a gold mine there, somebody who can
Yes.
show you their system, show you how they're doing it, help you to experience it. There's nothing like having somebody in person. I mean, that
really isn't.
That is the ultimate. But I will say, I would caution you to be careful, because not everybody who lives off the grid knows what they're talking about and is experienced. I have met quite a few people who live off the grid, and they are almost clueless about how their system works. Yes. And would give terrible advice if somebody came to them asking questions or whatever. So just living off the grid is not the only qualification you're looking for. You want to find somebody who really knows what they're talking about, who's been doing this for a number of years, and who has hopefully helped other people too, who's demonstrated that they have that experience. But the likelihood of finding somebody like that, I hope you do. I really do, because that will make your whole journey a whole lot easier. But the likelihood of finding that is fairly slim. And so because of that, because there aren't a lot of mentors out there that are willing to take people under their wing and share their experience like this, that's why I put together Off-Grid Boot Camp. I was telling you about it earlier. And, for years, we were looking for something to refer people to as we would do in-person classes at locations all over the country. We were just there for a short time, and I kept hoping and looking for something that I could refer people to for more in-depth, all-you-need-to-know training. And I never could find anything worthwhile. So I finally decided that I was going to have to build it myself. And I spent almost an entire year putting it together, and what emerged was the ultimate off-grid training course that covers more than I could ever hope to cover, even if you were to spend a week with us here at our home. It shows you how to dramatically reduce your system cost, how to choose the right solar panels and inverter and batteries and all the other components, how to properly design your own power system so that you are not at the mercy of some salesperson that you're buying from who has all the incentive in the world to sell you more equipment than you really need. This is so that you can make your own good decisions. And it's going to show you how to use and maintain your power system for high efficiency and for a long life, and end up with a power system that really works. So why don't we just jump into the boot camp right now and show you just a quick tour of it, just so you get an idea of what it looks like. So here we are in the dashboard, and if you scroll down, you can see the different modules. There's 9 modules, and in the basics, we cover some basic information for those of you that are brand new to off-grid power systems. And then Module 1 is about becoming energy efficient, choosing the right appliances, how to do this without changing your lifestyle dramatically. Module 2 is about batteries, what you need to know about choosing, using, and maintaining your batteries. Module 3 is about inverters. Module 4 is generators. Module 5 is solar panels and charge controllers. Module 6 is hydropower, if you happen to have a creek on your property, how to determine if that's suitable for hydro and how to use that. Module 7 is about wind power. Module 8 is all about designing your system. This is hugely valuable for showing you step by step how to actually design your system from start to finish and come up with a accurate idea of how many solar panels you need and how many, what size of battery bank you need and all of these kinds of things, even sizing the size of wires that you need and all of that. And then Module 9 is about using and maintaining your power system. And so it really is done in simple and easy to understand language that almost anybody can understand, even non-technical people.
And I just have to jump in and say, I helped film Off-Grid Boot Camp as Nick was teaching. I was behind the camera, and I remember more than one occasion I would finish filming, I'd turn the camera off, and I'd look at Nick and I'd say, that was amazing. I actually understood it. And believe me, I am as non-technical as non-technical gets. So if I can understand it, if he makes it simple enough for me to understand, then you certainly can understand it.
One of our students named John has this to say: I'm enjoying your Off-Grid Bootcamp program. I've already learned a lot. The links to external sites I find to be very helpful, and I plan to collect all the outlines and put them in a binder. I think the structure of the modules makes a lot of sense and divides topics into bite-sized chunks. I just wanted to mention that your videos are all meat and no fluff. They're a treasure trove of information, and I'm learning a lot. Once again, kudos to you on the boot camp. It is a real meat and potatoes program, not a Diet Cola program.
Very nice.
Thank you, John. We appreciate that. But we want you to be in a position where you'll no longer be at the mercy of someone else who may or may not be experienced and who may or may not have your best interests at heart. We want for you to be in the position where you can get input from retailers, but to take it with a grain of salt and make your own informed decisions.
So, what if you already have some experience and knowledge in off-grid power systems? Well, I think you'll really appreciate the attention to detail and the useful information that Nick presents. He gives you loads of information.
But what if you're just getting started and you're looking for simple and easy to understand explanations with a minimal amount of technical jargon? Well, I think that you are going to really find the Bare Necessities Quick Start Guides to be invaluable. Most modules start out with this section, the Bare Necessities Quick Start Guide, where it's kind of the Reader's Digest version of the module, and it gets you up to speed so that you have a working knowledge of the topic before jumping into the module, so that the whole module makes more sense.
So do you have a busy schedule and wonder if you'll have time for this training course? Well, you really will, because you can take it at your own pace. Each module is broken down into small bite-sized chunks, so you can start when you are ready and work your way through as you have time.
In fact, I know of people who enrolled so that they would have access when they needed it a year or two down the road. So that's totally fine.
So here's what Levi had to say about Off-Grid Bootcamp. He says, I'm currently enrolled in your Off-Grid Bootcamp course. It's brilliant. Thank you. Your materials are detailed, well evaluated, and thorough. As a novice to off-grid living, not there yet, I value your approach.
Now, you know the old saying that a picture is worth 1,000 words. And so the course is primarily video-based, with much of it filmed at our off-grid classroom. And there's also field trips on location to actual systems when that's needed to make things clearer. But we felt like some of these things you just have to see to really understand it. Now, before you enroll, I want to make sure you understand who this course is not for. It is not for someone who wants a tiny, ineffective, or poor quality power system that could barely power a dollhouse. We live normally in our home, and we power the whole operation with our off-grid power system. And that is what you're going to learn to do in this course.
Also, this course is not going to make you an electrician and teach you how to wire your house. It's about how to design, set up, and use an off-grid power system. Anyone who is already comfortable with safely wiring a house should find it fairly simple to actually do the connecting of wires for an off-grid power system. And don't worry, if you're not familiar with wiring, any electrician can do that part. But what isn't so straightforward is how to properly size the system, choose the best components for the job, set up those components for maximum efficiency, and maintain them for a long life. And that is what you are going to learn in Off-Grid Bootcamp, and a whole lot more.
You know, Ed, one of our students, had this to say: I'm so impressed with your program, having viewed all of it since subscribing. I had read books, emails, and talked to individuals, and none explained things like your videos. After your help, I'm getting ready to install an off-grid system.
Yes!
That's right. You go, Ed. So simply put, if you want to successfully go off the grid and do it right the first time, then this is a really, really good fit for you.
As far as I'm aware, there's nothing out there like Off-Grid Bootcamp. For years, we've been searching for a complete and thorough training course that teaches the user about off-grid power systems, and we still have yet to find one.
The closest thing I could find is a training course for someone who wants to become a professional solar installer. But I haven't really been comfortable sending anyone there because it focuses on the technical issues that an installer faces rather than what the end user needs to know, namely choosing, using, and maintaining a system. And then there's the cost of these things. You can expect to pay over $5,000 for the complete course. And even if you pick out just the bare bones skeleton of online classes, you'd still be looking at roughly $2,000. And while I have little doubt that it's well worth it for a professional installer, it's just not practical for folks like you and me who just want to go off the grid successfully and aren't interested in making a profession out of it. Plus, we have a whole set of things that we need to learn as users that an installer isn't going to be as familiar with.
So in Off-Grid Bootcamp, you're also going to be saving yourself some serious money. Take Module 1, for instance. The strategies you will learn in that module alone could easily save you thousands, and I mean thousands of dollars, simply by reducing your power usage and system size without impacting your lifestyle hardly at all.
Or let's say you're putting in a solar system. It's going to cost you at least a couple $100s, if not more, just to get a professional solar site analysis. And even if you're doing it on your own, you could easily spend $300 on the equipment to do it accurately. Well, Module 5 in Off-Grid Bootcamp teaches you how to do an accurate shade analysis with minimal equipment that in most cases costs less than $5. This is only one of the money-saving techniques that you're going to learn in Module 5.
So, what's Off-Grid Bootcamp going to cost? Well, you might expect to pay the $5,000 that a solar installer's course would cost. Or maybe you might be able to pick it up for the $2,000 that the bare bones classes would cost you. But I have had to go off the grid with a limited budget, and so we know exactly what it's like. So even though Off-Grid Bootcamp would be worth every penny at that price and would still more than pay for itself, we decided to cut the price down where you'll be able to enroll for just a fraction of that. So let's total up the value of what you're getting, and then I have a very special deal for you.
The first thing that you're going to get with Off-Grid Bootcamp is the core curriculum, which is regularly $597. That is instant access to all 9 modules and the ability to both view the content online and download it to your computer. In addition, if you sign up right now, I'm going to throw in a huge bonus. If you enroll right away, I'm going to give you a free 6-month subscription to my live coaching program, where you can have direct access to me for help with getting answers to your questions. And in addition to the coaching calls, you'll get access to my private Off-Grid Bootcamp Facebook group for members only. In this group, I'll be available to give you personal feedback and answers in case something comes up and you don't want to wait until the next coaching call. It's almost like having me on call. This way, you won't be left to figure out things by yourself. And of course, as always, when you're a member of Off-Grid Bootcamp, I'm available for email support too. If you want to email me, if you're not on Facebook or whatever, I answer a lot of questions on email.
In addition, we have another bonus for you. Not only do you get the many detailed outlines that come with the Off-Grid Bootcamp, but we're also going to give you our ebook, Off-Grid Power Systems. This ebook will give you an excellent foundation to build on as you jump into the training modules.
And then another bonus, I'm also going to give you instant access to over a dozen previously recorded question and answer sessions that I've had with students. I've been asked so many questions that you might not even think of asking. And so you'll get to hear my answers to all those questions, and it's going to be a huge learning experience for you.
Then there's the question we've been looking at today. How do we go off the grid when we don't have a ton of money to put into this? Glad you asked, because you are going to get the entire mini-series that we put together on this very topic. It's called Off-Grid on a Budget, and it covers some of the most effective strategies that Nick has come up with for reducing the cost of an off-grid power system and yet still have a quality system that really works for you.
I've gotten a ton of fantastic feedback about this series from others who've gone through it, and I'm sure you're going to find it incredibly helpful.
But beyond saving money, the other thing you might be thinking about is, what equipment specifically should I get and where is the best place to buy it? Well, we are going to give you instant access to an entire presentation that Nick did on this very topic. It's called Off-Grid Buyer's Guide, Quality on a Budget. And he walks you through the basic equipment that he recommends with specific brands and models, and also shows you where he finds the best prices for that equipment. It's an invaluable resource when you get ready to start purchasing your equipment. So you're probably wondering, what's it going to cost?
Well, let's total up the value of all this, and then I'm going to make you an amazing deal. So what you're going to get is Off-Grid Bootcamp, value of $597, 6-month coaching program, $180 value, the ultimate question and answer sessions, $47 value, the Off-Grid Power Systems ebook, $20 value, Off-Grid on a Budget mini course, $45 value, Off-Grid Buyer's Guide class, $29 value, and this totals up to a value of $918. Now, obviously, we're not going to charge $918 for this package, although we could. But I want to ask you that if we did charge $918 and you invested that, if all this did was to cut your power usage to 10 or 15% of the national average and save you literally tens of thousands of dollars in off-grid system costs, would it be worth it to spend $918 for that? And If all this did was to save you from wasting thousands of dollars by purchasing the wrong off-grid equipment, would it be worth it to spend $918? And if all this did was enable you to successfully become energy independent while living comfortably, would it be worth it? You can see why it's such a good deal at $918. It'd be a steal, but I'm going to make you an amazing offer. And I'm not even going to charge the $597 that Off-Grid Bootcamp could easily sell for by itself, and that it does sell for regularly by itself. You've taken the effort to register for this class that just took place, and that tells me that you're serious. And because of that, because you're so serious, I'm going to give you instant access to Off-Grid Bootcamp for only $297.
Wow.
For everything. And all you have to do is click on the button on the right, and I'll give you instant access so you can literally get started within seconds or within a minute or two.
Now, just to put this in perspective, you could easily spend at least $200 to $300 just for a professional solar shade analysis. And that is all you would have. We won't even get into what it would cost to have someone do a thorough system design for you. So just the solar shade analysis could pay for this entire package. And then you'd end up with the ability to save untold thousands of dollars in system costs and from avoiding common mistakes that many newbies make. So if you're ready to start your off-grid transition the right way and want to have a really successful experience with it, then click the button on the right.
So one of our students named Howard says, I took this off-grid bootcamp and it was very, very worth the money it cost. I can highly recommend it.
And Dave P. said, it was the best money I ever spent.
Now, how do you know if Off-Grid Bootcamp is right for you? Well, I'll tell you what. Test this out for a solid month. Watch or download all the videos and outlines. Ask all your questions on the coaching calls. And at the end of 30 days, if you are not completely satisfied with what you're getting out of it, if for whatever reason you find that it just isn't for you, I'll give you a full refund, no questions asked. Just send me an email. And guess what? You get to keep everything you've downloaded as a free gift just for taking the time to give it a try. So really, you have absolutely nothing to lose. Either you love the course and you find that it saves you tons of time and money, blood, sweat, and tears, or else you end up with a bunch of awesome training material for free. Now, you may think that I'm sticking my neck out on this, but that's how confident I am that you will be completely satisfied with Off-Grid Bootcamp. If you aren't happy, I'm not happy. No harm, no foul.
So if you are still trying to decide whether Off-Grid Bootcamp is right for you, we're going to make it really easy. You don't have to figure it out today. And how would you really know without actually jumping in and testing it? So click on the button on the right and give it a shot. You'll have 30 days to decide if you want to keep it or not. If it's not what you're looking for, just send us an email and you'll get every penny of your money back. No questions asked.
You know, Jean says, I'm amazed and impressed by the thoroughness and attention to detail that you give us in this boot camp experience. So how do you get started? Well, what you're going to do is to get started, you're going to click on the button on the right, and that's going to take you to a details page where it's going to give you details. And on that page, there's going to be a button that you can click to check out. You're going to click that button and it's going to take you to the checkout page where you enter your info. And then once you have entered your info and you click on the complete order button, then you will be automatically logged in to Off-Grid Bootcamp where you can access everything immediately. And then you will also receive a welcome email within a few minutes that will contain your username and your password and everything that you need to get logged in and get started with Off-Grid Bootcamp. So go ahead and click on the button on the right to jump in and get started. So now we want to get into the question and answer session. And we're going to go through some questions that come up about off-grid power systems. And hopefully, we're not going to be able to cover all of the questions that have come up here verbally in the presentation. We're busy beavers on the chat as we're, in progress here, trying to get your questions answered in the chat box. But we're going to try and cover some of what we think are some of the most popular, most commonly asked questions here in the presentation. So let's go ahead and jump into that. So what's our first question?
Okay, so our first question is it feasible to go off grid in a place that gets heavy snow, including snow falling on the solar panels?
Absolutely. What you just described is where we live.
Yes.
It's a abnormal winter if we don't have at least 3 to 5 feet of snow on the ground for a good part of the winter. So absolutely it is. One thing that we do is we will tilt our solar panels to a steeper pitch in the wintertime, and that does two things. One is it aligns us where the solar panels are more perpendicular to the rays of the sun, because the sun is lower in the horizon during the wintertime, especially up here in northern latitudes. It's pretty low down there in the sky, and so we'll tilt the solar panels more vertically, not vertical, but I'm saying more vertically than they were. And that aligns us where we're more perpendicular to the sun, and also it helps with shedding the snow in the winter. And, the solar panels, they heat up pretty quickly, even on rather cool days. And at least in our climate, we find that the solar panels shed snow pretty well on their own. There are some times in the winter where there's the right kind of snow where it just sticks to the solar panels, or maybe the solar panels were wet and then it snowed and then it got cold and froze, where it got kind of icy. In those kind of situations, then I'll pull out a push broom with a long handle and I'll sweep the solar panels off. I don't do it that many times, but it is there are some times that I do that. But absolutely, it's quite possible to do that.
Yes. Well, okay. So next question. Can I really power all the basics? That is a stove, a fridge, clothes washer, as well as being able to run a computer and other basic technology off-grid in an urban, suburban location?
So really, I'd say there's two parts to this question. One is, can I power all of these things? And then the other part would be, can I go off the grid in an urban or suburban location? So the first part of the question, yes and no. You mentioned stove, and if you're referring to an electric stove or oven, yes, it is possible, but we recommend that for most folks that they look at other options, because those great big electric heating element appliances use massive amounts of electricity, and you have to build a rather large off-grid system to power them, and that means more money. And so you can dramatically cut the size of your power system if you switch to something like propane, or another option like a wood cook stove in the winter and maybe a sun oven in the summer or something like that. You can dramatically cut the cost of your off-grid system by doing such a thing. So that's what I would say about that. But absolutely, you can power all the basics. I mean, you saw how we live here in our house, and we have the refrigerator, and we have a freezer, and water heater, and clothes washer, and computers, and all that. We run our home business here from home, off the grid.
Yeah, clothes iron,
Yes,
popcorn popper, curling iron, blow dryer, like the works.
all these kinds of things. So absolutely to part one. Part two, can you go off the grid in an urban, suburban location? And I would say that kind of depends on your location, how urban, how much room you have to work with, things like that, and also upon local regulations. I think everybody knows it's probably easier to go off the grid in a more rural location, where you have more space, because there is a certain amount of space that it takes for your solar array, unless you're putting it on the roof of your house. And that may be the best option in a urban location. I don't like, personally, maybe I'm an oddball, but I know I've heard other people say the same thing, but just based upon experience, I do not like putting solar panels on the roof unless that's the only place that I can put them, because I like to have them closer to the ground where I can access them and things like that without risking my life. I don't like getting up on the roof in the middle of winter. So, in an urban location, though, I would be inclined to probably put them on the roof, because that's going to require less space, obviously, and get them away from hands, that might be tinkering around with them, people walking by or whatever. But these are the kinds of things that you're going to have to think about, that and also local regulations, and that varies widely. I can't speak to those. I imagine that that there are some urban locations where they maybe don't allow solar arrays on the ground. I know some urban locations are very restrictive about things like this. So you'd have to check into that. So, can you do it? Is it within the realm of possibility? Absolutely. The question is going to be more along a regulatory line, and also how much space do you have to work with?
Very good. Okay, so next question. How many solar panels, inverters, storage batteries, etc. must one obtain in order to power an arc welder?
So an arc welder, I'm going to assume that you're talking about like a BuzzBox, like one of those old Lincoln BuzzBox arc welders, as opposed to a smaller wire feed welder. With something like that, what I would suggest that you do, well, I guess it would depend upon how much you're going to be using that welder. If this is something that you are going to be using, a little bit every day, or you're going to be using it throughout the day periodically, then probably you would want to go ahead and build a system that's big enough to power that. And yes, you can do that. It is, an arc welder can take a substantial amount of power, so you are going to have to build a larger system to power it, but you can certainly do that. But I think for most people, they probably are not going to be running an arc welder that frequently. My guess is that most people aren't going to be running it more than once or twice a week, and a lot of people aren't even going to run it that often. So if that is you, then what I would suggest that you do is that you don't worry about the welder when you're sizing your power system. Just size your power system as if you weren't even going to run the welder. And then when you do need it, on those few times where you do need it, just start up your generator and run it off the generator. And then, the prerequisite for that is going to be making sure that you have a generator that's large enough to power your welder. But that's what I would suggest doing. And you're going to save yourself a lot of money, because there's no sense in building a bigger system for something that you're not going to be using regularly.
Okay, well, that's very good. Okay, what is your recommendation for an off-grid internet solution?
Well, this is something that we deal with on a daily basis because, we operate a home business. We're out in the middle of nowhere, and, I plow 3 miles of road. That's how far out we are. And so in the wintertime, I plow the snow off of 3 miles of road. And so we're miles from the power lines and from everything. And so obviously there's no hardwire internet running here. So I've used most of the options out there over the years. I've used a satellite internet, HughesNet. I've used wireless broadband, as in like Verizon Wireless, one of those internet cards.
MiFi cards.
Yeah, little MiFi cards. And we actually had to get a Yagi directional antenna for our card in order to be able to hit a good high-speed tower. But once we did, it was nice. It was very fast. The major thing for us was the limitation in how much data we had. And so that was a little bit challenging with the line of work that we're in, but it worked, and it worked well. And so that would certainly be a workable solution for most people. The satellite internet, back when we used it, which was years ago, it wasn't so good. I have friends now that are using it, and they're pretty happy with it. There is a delay there, latency of the time that it takes for it to go up to the satellite and come back down, which means that it doesn't work very well for a voice over IP phone or a VoIP phone. But that can certainly be a workable solution, and you can use that from almost anywhere, as long as you don't have a great big mountain in just the wrong position, just to the south of us. But that's an option. But what we're using now is the best option we've found so far. And this is one that's very locally dependent. And that is, in our area and in many other areas, there are companies that will set up a microwave tower on the tops of mountains or other high areas, and they will beam high-speed microwave internet down to you. And so basically what you end up with is essentially a hardwire connection, except you don't have a hardwire connecting you. The latency is the same basically as a hardwire almost, and there's no data restrictions and all of that. So that's what we do for our internet, and it works very well.
Very good. And it does. We've got unlimited here at the house, so It really is a blessing. Okay.
I think you might ought to go take a
Thinking
look at
so
the kids.
too.
So Lisa's going to have to bail out on us here, folks. Sorry about that. But with 2 little ones, you know how that goes. So I'll just finish up here. Just a few more questions real quick, and then we'll finish up. So let's see. After your initial installation of solar panels, did you find you needed additional solar panels? And did you have room for additional panels? Yes, actually, and this kind of builds into the whole concept that we were trying to present earlier in this class, and that is the idea of taking this one step at a time. And so you can break it down into even smaller steps than what we showed. Rather than the final step being just add all the solar that you need, you could add a smaller amount of solar and then later on add more solar. Now, one caveat that I would add on to that is that if you were wanting to add additional solar onto that existing array of solar panels, then you would probably not want to wait too terribly many years, because you're going to want to be able to get a hold of solar panels that are very similar in the voltage and amperage that they put out, similar size, basically similar makeup, hopefully the same brand. It'd be nice if it was the same solar panels, in order to fit in with your current existing array. Now, if that is not possible, then you could certainly add additional solar still. You're just going to have to build it as a separate array where it has its own charge controller. So bottom line is, whether or not you can get a hold of the same solar panels, you can add on more solar later. It's just that it's going to cost a little more, where you'll have to add an additional charge controller and some additional wiring, rather than potentially being able to use the same one that you would be able to if you were to find the same solar panels that you were using. So I hope that makes sense. Another question: are you on county sewer system, or do you have a compost toilet system? Actually, we are none of the above. We have a septic system, and that's what most folks in the country have. And that's, we're way, way, way beyond the reach of county sewer. And honestly, I wouldn't want to be on county sewer even if it was running all the way out here. And composting toilets, they may be great. I've never tried one. I guess I've just had a hard time getting my brain wrapped around the idea of one. But maybe I'd try it, and I'd just think it was the greatest thing since sliced bread. I guess that was rather a poor analogy. But anyhow, no, we use a septic system, and that's basically where you have a septic tank buried in the ground, and your sewage goes in there, and the liquids go out through what's called a bleeder field or a leach field, and they absorb back into the soil, and then the earth purifies it as it filters through the soil. And it all works very well, and there's no smells or anything like that, and it's all gravity based unless you have an unusual situation, not even any electric pumps or anything for the sewage system. It all just happens on the principle of gravity. And then I guess we'll go ahead and finish up with this question here. As far as verbally here on the class, I don't want to drag this out too long. And, like we said, we'll hang on in the chat box. But last question here: how do you handle refrigeration? Some medications need it. So for a refrigerator, you may have noticed earlier in the class, we showed you our refrigerator that we use. And it's a little bit of a odd or different refrigerator than what you might be used to, because we were looking to find a ultra efficient refrigerator that used a very small amount of power, but yet we didn't want to pay an arm and a leg for a specialty DC powered refrigerator. And so what we did was we took a chest freezer, just a fairly conventional chest freezer, and we added an external thermostat to it and turned it into a refrigerator, where instead of it taking the temperature down to 0 or 20 below or something like that, it takes the temperature down to, say, 38 degrees or something like that. And with a freezer, the insulation is thicker on a freezer than it is on a refrigerator, so that makes it more efficient. And also, with it being a chest model, every time you lift the door, that cold air down in there stays in the chest freezer. Whereas with an upright model, when you open the door, cold air sinks and it tends to fall out of it. So it's less efficient if you're opening it a lot. Now, granted, a chest model is not as convenient. And so, we were willing to trade a little bit of convenience for efficiency. And you certainly don't have to do that, but that's how we handle our refrigeration. You could certainly use an upright, and there's some great options out there, either conventional ones that cost less but use more power, or you could go with a specialty upright like a Sunfrost model, and they are going to be much more expensive, but they're very energy efficient. So there's a lot of options out there. And Module 1 of Off-Grid Bootcamp actually goes into that in great detail, walks you through all of these kinds of appliance decisions and things like that. So anyhow, we'll go ahead and wrap up the class here, but we just want to thank you so much for attending and being a part of this, for all of these questions. Like we've said previously, we'll hang into the chat box here. If you have asked a question and we haven't gotten around to it, please feel free to type it in the chat box again, because it may have gotten lost in all of the chatter that's been going on. And we'll hang in here and try and get your questions answered. And I just want to encourage you that if you ever have any dream of going off the grid at either now or at any point in time in the future, try out Off-Grid Bootcamp. This is something that I wish that we had had when we took this plunge. It would have saved us so much blood, sweat, and tears and everything. We could have done it right the first time. And so I just want to encourage you to try it out. If it's not for you, no problem. You got 30 days and to try it out. But just see if it's something that would be a help to you as you prepare to make this transition, either step by step or all at once. You really need to do your homework. Please don't take the approach of just jumping into this like I've seen so many people do, where they just jump into this and start buying a bunch of equipment and try and get it hooked up, and then they call me and they say, why isn't my system working? And, I don't want that to happen to you, because that is the expensive way to do it, believe me, and it's the hard way to do it. So this is your chance to make this transition as seamless and easy as possible and as inexpensive as possible. So go ahead and click on the button there, and I look forward to assisting you each step of your journey off the grid. And thanks again for attending the class, and we'll try and get your questions answered here, and hope you have a wonderful evening.